The information contained in this video is strictly for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, legal, or other professional advice and is not a substitute for consultation with a qualified professional. The opinions expressed in the show do not necessarily reflect the views of the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development, Borough of Manhattan Community College, and the City University of New York. State of Mind is a web-based discussion program that explores the relevant social, economic, and political issues that are prominent at the post-secondary level of education. State of Mind is sponsored by the Center for Continuing Education and Workforce Development at the Borough of Manhattan Community College. BMCC. Start here, go anywhere. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Krishna Nadella, and this is State of Mind. We're kicking off a new series entitled Crisis on Campus. Our topic today is bullying and depression. With us here today to help us better understand our topic and provide their unique perspectives are the following guests. To my immediate left is Dr. Tina Walsh. She is currently the medical director at South Oaks Hospital, part of the North Shore Long Island Jewish Health System. She is also the director of the perinatal psychiatry services at South Oaks Hospital and serves on a steering committee for Katz Women's Hospital at Long Island Jewish Medical Center. Dr. Walsh received her BA from Williams College, her MPH from Yale University, and her MD from Michigan State University. To Dr. Walsh's immediate left is Vice President Scott Anderson, who has served as BMCC's Vice President of Administration and Planning since 2000. He has more than 40 years of professional experience in higher education administration in CUNY at the campus and university levels. VP Anderson received his associate's degree from Queensborough Community College, Certificate of Study from Ruskin College, baccalaureate degree from Queens College, and master's degree from Baruch College. And finally, to the immediate left of Vice President Anderson is Deputy Commissioner Charles DeRienzo, who is currently the president of SecureCon LLC, a consulting firm that provides assistance in training, management, and security issues based on his extensive 42 years of experience in law enforcement. Prior to SecureCon, he began his law enforcement career with the NYPD in 1965 as a police officer and retired in 2008 as a deputy commissioner. Mr. DeRienzo graduated from the New York Institute of Technology and attended the Columbia University Graduate School of Business and the New York City Police Management Institute. Dr. Walsh, Vice President Anderson, Commissioner DeRienzo, thank you for your time today. I'd like to start our show off with some statistics just to frame up what we're talking about. Bullying has been found to occur for college undergraduates, with 18.5% reporting having been bullied once or twice, and 22% reporting being the victim of cyberbullying. 38% of students knew someone who had been cyberbullied, while almost 9% admitted to bullying someone else on the internet. All students, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, physical condition, popularity, or weight, can be targets of bullying and cyberbullying. The most common vehicles for cyberbullying reported include social networking sites, text messages, emails, and instant messages. And finally, the use of technology allows bullies to act anonymously and instantaneously, which may increase the persistence and maliciousness of the attacks. Dr. Walsh, I'd like to start off with you. Can you help provide our audience with a better understanding of what constitutes bullying?
Basically, bullying is a set of behaviors that are aggressive in nature and serve to exert some dominance over another person, and typically take the form of harassing verbal threats, could be physical threats or intimidation or the suggestion of those types of things. And it serves then to have the victim of the bullying become somewhat afraid and potentially withdrawn, while the perpetrator of the bullying gets a sense for some people of increased self-esteem or some sort of way of making themselves somewhat more aggrandized.
All right, so with that train of thought, it's been said that adolescent and young adult students who engage in bullying towards others tend to have high emotionality, low self-control, and may lack empathy for others' experiences. As such, is bullying innate or environmental?
Well, it's actually probably both. Okay. That parenting and your home life have a lot to do with how you react, cope with other people, interact with other people. But there are probably some genetic predispositions as well to certain kinds of behaviors, personality types, lack of empathy particularly. But how one reacts in a situation with others, or how one interacts with other people is probably a lot to do with your early learning and training as you grow up.
So let's talk about the contrast between the bully and the victim. You had mentioned the childhood years being somewhat of an influence. How much does that typically play into the bully growing up and continuing that behavior when they reach the college years?
I think a lot of times the child who grows up to be a bully was in some way victimized at home. Either there's a domineering or controlling way that discipline is manifested in the home as they grow up, or there's a lack of real demonstration of empathy for others, or perhaps a lack of exposure to people of different weights, ethnicities, cultural backgrounds, and some insularity about what is the right way to be, and a lack of flexibility perhaps.
On the flip side, what is it about the victim that makes them a target?
Well, I think particularly in the teen years it's being different, and anything that it's very important for teens to feel included and part of the group. You notice as you raise your own children that they depend less on you and more upon their peers for their reinforcing behaviors. So anything that mostly casts you outside of that peer group, whether it's you're brighter, less bright, heavier, skinnier, whatever, a different color, a different shape, size, faith or a personality type may target you or make you stand out from that crowd and be more likely to be a victim of a bully. VP
Anderson, I see you nodding in agreement. Would you like to add to that?
No, I think that Dr. Walsh is absolutely right. I will say, however, that for us on the college level, what we describe as bullying, I think the statistics you gave us, for instance, could probably treble in size if you threw in sexual harassment, because there's a power relationship, power victim relationship. And sometimes it may be anonymous, if they're using the internet, et cetera. But I think that bullying is actually a much larger problem than the stats would indicate. And I think you would agree, Doctor. Right?
The anonymous piece is probably what's escalating some of that.
Yes.
Because as people, it's very hard to face-to-face watch someone else's distress. But when you have that remote, the distance separation, you're not actually seeing the distress you're causing your victim. Rather, you're able to send out this harassing threats or negative comments, and you don't see and respond to emotional changes in the recipient.
Exactly.
It's a lot easier to be a bully because you're removed. You don't see the consequences of your actions.
It takes away the human element of it 100%. So, Commissioner DeRienzo, from a law enforcement standpoint, does bullying constitute a crime? And if not, should it?
Well, it's a complex issue. And the New York State penal law statutes regarding harassment, menacing, and stalking come into play in these instances. And when you get to the age of the offenders, it comes into play. If they're youthful offenders, it winds up being a youth crime, and usually it's dealt with by the family courts. Okay. As you get older into college, it becomes a true criminal act, and you wind up in the criminal court system. Menacing, harassment, you have to violate those statutes. And I say complex because Governor Cuomo, a couple of years ago, signed a bill written by the state legislature for cyberbullying. And it was in effect for about 2 years, and a case was brought to the appellate court. The appellate court ruled the law unconstitutional because they said it violated the person's constitutional right of free speech. It was a case, upstate New York, high school, somebody posting things of a number of people in the class, which was embarrassing and sometimes a little worse than that. But the case was ruled unconstitutional. The law was ruled unconstitutional. So you can understand the complexity of these things. For the police officer, you have to have the crime committed. You have to look at the statutes of harassment, or the statutes of menacing, or the statutes of hazing, or and if it all fits into that statute, you can then make an arrest, bring the people to court. As a victim of these incidents, You can, if it's constant, if it falls within the law, you can go to your local precinct, you can make a complaint, fits within the statute. You can get a order of protection issued by the court system to prevent people from doing this to you.
So let me ask you a question that you kind of alluded to earlier. Does bullying have the potential to be a gateway to more egregious actions later on in one's life? If it's not contained, if it's not controlled, if it's not dealt with, if that behavior is allowed to continue and fester, is that something you've seen with individuals that you've encountered in your time with the NYPD when you look at their prior history?
I really couldn't talk to that issue. I would really refer to Dr. Walsh on those issues.
I would think it's sometimes. I would imagine that some of the bullies grow up and grow out of it and develop as your forebrain develops and you have more of control over your impulses and have a longer-term view of the world. A good number of kids who engage in sort of mean girl behavior grow out of it. But there are likely a group of people who are antisocial conduct disorder before the age of 18 that evolve into antisocial personality disorders and more into the criminal realm. So it's some of the kids I think will mature out of that with proper guidance, but others may not.
Fair enough. So on the topic, Dr. Walsh and Deputy Commissioner DeRienzo, if parental influence plays a role in the upbringing of an individual, what is the responsibility, if any, of the parents on children who are bullies?
See, I think it's enormous. I think it really lies early on with the parents who are the parents of the bullies. The teacher should bring that to their attention. The other parents should bring that to their attention, and it should be enforced in the family that this is not appropriate behavior, but also teaching the kids pro-social coping skills, because there's something going on with them that's leading to this either sense of inadequacy, so they have to dominate other kids, or something to address that. Now, it could be that that home life is not so hot, and there's like domestic violence or abuse or sadistic parenting, and that's a whole nother situation. You cannot then rely necessarily on those parents to do the proper thing, because perhaps they never learned the proper thing on how to raise their child. I have an interesting story. My nephew is actually autistic, and as a child, he was not bullied. He was brought up with other kids in the neighborhood who accepted him for who he was. And the heartwarming story is when one day when he was not met by his mother, my sister, at the bus stop, every kid on that bus route told their mother that he was not met by someone and had them call and were concerned. Those kids were raised very early on to have an awareness of other people that are different, an acceptance, and more treating them as you would want them to treat someone with some disadvantages or disabilities. So it can be done, I mean, with proper early exposure and proper parenting.
But if it's not, with the parents, then, where do we go? And if it gets to the criminal element, there's, things that the judge can do as far as counseling and the like. In the schools, I'm sure there are things that Dr. Anderson, Vice President Anderson, has dealt with and has resources for.
I think that what's been said here is that if the culture change and the behavior change is not successful in the home life, by the time that individual reaches a college campus, now you've got, in addition to raging hormones and everything else, now you have a situation that could really be disastrous. What colleges have a responsibility for, if you look at the whole history and culture of in loco parentis, we have a terrific responsibility to safeguard students, faculty, and staff. And when it comes to behavior that's not acceptable, for instance, with students during the orientation time, we let students know what is acceptable behavior. As another step, however, we have what's called BIT teams, the behavior intervention teams. When a student is acting out, they are brought to that team, and it'll be a professional, a mental health professional involved, and a public safety member involved. They will try to counsel that student to let them know what's acceptable, what is not acceptable behavior. We go another step, which is to inform faculty what is acceptable and unacceptable behavior, so that they don't tolerate behavior that maybe pushes the envelope and what's going to be a problem later. So I think that on a college campus you have a series of systems in place, not just for bullying, but also for workplace violence, because as Commissioner DeRienzo said, that, there are some of our students are coming to campus with orders of protection.
Yeah.
Campuses are notoriously open environments. Anyone can come onto the campus, so we have to make sure that we're able to respond to that. So
Yes. And for the victims, what is bullying? What can they do about it? What can they find out about it? StopBullying.gov is a website that they can go to find out a huge amount of information from New York State about bullying and what their protections might be, how they can identify it, and some of the things that they can do to try and deal with the bullying. But within the school is a great resource. This Borough Manhattan Community College is very proactive in trying to deal with these issues with their security department and their counselors. Outside, you need to go to your local police precinct if this is happening to you, not involved in a school, and try to get them to help you to deal with these issues.
So I'd like to talk a little bit more. You had mentioned about the BIT program that you currently have implemented. How much interplay does law enforcement work with the academic institutions to really make sure that whatever is put into place to prevent things like bullying are not just compliant, but also measures that will allow for students to really find an environment that's safe, that's educational, and ultimately informative?
Actually, I think we've been very fortunate at BMCC. We have a public safety day twice a semester. And one of the startling discoveries we had was we had a domestic violence representative from the precinct come, set up a table. The first year it was a man who personed that table. Ironically, there were about 15 or 16 women lined up to talk to this individual who they didn't know. That gave us a barometer. That told us that we really had to work closer with PD to make sure that our students, whether they're male or female, had someone that they could get a very concrete and proactive information from and advice. There are people who do not want to be victims. They will help themselves. They will self-help. They'll seek help.
Sure.
But there are a lot of students who are on our campus who don't know that they don't have to be a victim, whether it's bullying or sexual harassment, workplace violence. And I think that that's where the college really has to step up and make sure that we have programs and support systems in place that are educational to let people know what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and where they can go to actually file their grievance or file their complaint or get help. And we have a very close relationship with NYPD, thankfully.
Excellent.
Yes, and I've seen that myself, the Director of Security here, and Vice President Anderson have a close relationship with the local precinct commander and are in constant touch with them regarding issues that happen on the campus.
And our counseling department is very much involved, and that's important. You have to have a hand-in-glove relationship. It's neither one or the other.
Excellent. So I'd like to actually take our conversation, steer it a little towards more of the mental health aspect. Studies have linked experiences of being bullied with significant health and psychological issues, such as depression, emotional distress, low self-esteem, and poor academic achievement. Dr. Walsh, my question to you is, understanding that depression is a serious mental illness marked by sad or anxious feelings, where does depression caused by bullying classify amongst its many forms?
Depression is depression, and whether or not there's some factors that leading up, stressors that may push someone over the edge who's got a biological vulnerability to depression into an actual diagnosis of depression, we treat it the same way. Although we would like to remove whatever stressor is aggravating the situation, the pharmacology and the psychotherapy that would be provided to such a person would be similar. There's a range of options for people, from medications to therapy alone to the combination, that can be helpful.
Okay. How would you treat someone who's depressed from bullying?
It depends, again, how seriously depressed they are, if there is suicidal ideation accompanying the depression or not. But for most patients, the combination of individual or group psychotherapy with pharmacologic interventions, antidepressant medications most typically, and there's a range of those that one could choose from, are very, very helpful.
So most colleges offer free or low-cost mental health services to students. Are these services enough, and this is to both you, Dr. Walsh, and to you, VP Anderson, or are they simply Band-Aids and don't address the issue of the bully itself?
I think they're related, but both need to be addressed simultaneously. One is providing the support for the victim and the treatment for the victim should they self-identify and be willing to come for treatment. It's a voluntary process, typically. The other is to address the perpetrator, and that is, I think, starts way before college in the early years because you're then reacting to a problem that's already quite mature at this point in time. And that has all the legal and college supports that you've already described here.
But I think in addition to that, a college has a responsibility of creating an environment where students know that they're going to be heard.
Validated.
You know, and validated. And that there's something is going to happen, that their issue is not going to be glossed over or ignored. That's the worst thing that can happen. I mean, if you look at the origin of Cleary, for instance, you'll see that came out of a parent who felt that the college ignored their daughter's complaints. And that's, I think we're, as a community, the higher ed institutions in this country are becoming very, very sensitive to that. They must be proactive in providing a venue for people who are wanting to turn somewhere for help.
So with that,
the other piece of it, though, is that studies have shown that if the others surrounding, witnessing the bullying, step in and help, whether that's to say, this isn't cool, guys, in the cyber chat rooms, or to, if you're present, physically say something, step in and say something, that helps a lot. So some of the college education and training is letting people know they too are empowered. If you see it on a chat site, step up, say something, do something, because that tends to diminish the positive feelings that the bully is getting when other people chime in and say, hey, that's not cool, dude.
And oh, sorry, Charlie, I just wanted to say that as with respect to the faculty and staff, I'm going to amplify what Dr. Walsh is saying. They have an obligation now. If they hear something, they must not say something. They must report it. So,
and you may find that in the college setting, you would have people doing what Dr. Walsh is saying, stepping forward a little bit more than in the lower school grades, where they might be more concerned to step forward. And you might have a group of students here who would try to support another student, especially within the student groups. You know, when they belong to different the student groups, they may lend support to a student who may be having a problem, and then be able to step forward because they're more mature now. You know, as young people, they don't know how to deal with these things. Growing up in New York City, people learn, how to deal with these issues, and so I think in the college setting, you may have more people, able to step forward and help out.
So, depression is also a major risk factor for suicide. It has been reported by the American College Health Association National College Health Assessment that more than 6% of college students reported seriously considering suicide, and about 1% reported attempting suicide in the previous year. Taking a page out of the headlines, actually 4 years ago, Tyler Clemente, a freshman of Rutgers University, committed suicide after being taunted and bullied online by his roommates for his sexual orientation and preference. Understanding that this was one of the most public cases of cyberbullying, what role does the internet best serve, and how can we ensure that we mitigate the harm that it can induce and instead provide a platform for self-discovery? And I think you kind of alluded to that, Dr. Walsh.
I think that's tough, though. That was actually, I think, a case where he was spied on and had a tremendous shame reaction to being outed, I guess, or having what he felt was not egocentric behavior or not something that he wanted other people to know about. Publicly blasted all over the place, and I think that intense shame reaction caused him to take his own life. That's a tough one to catch because that happened relatively quickly.
Very quickly.
There wasn't an ongoing series, as far as I recall, of bullying events,
it was very
but it was a public blast of overwhelming shame.
And from the law enforcement perspective, that raised that bullying to aggravated harassment, which is a felony, which can land you in jail for more than a year.
Right.
So the bully should know that
Yeah.
when they get to that point, sexual orientation, color of skin, or any of these other issues that come about, they really ramp up the crime,
Right.
and can put themselves in great jeopardy, for going to jail, convicted of these.
So I actually want to take that thought,
Yeah.
Vice President Anderson, from a crisis management standpoint, how does a college respond to such an incident, and what measures would you take to recommend once a student does report being bullied to prevent it from entering the range where Tyler Clemente went?
If a student reports being bullied, first of all, we have to create a very safe environment for them to actually unload this shame and feel that they're going to be listened to. All right, then that's your counseling department, and they're equipped to do this. But I think that the other issue, which is what the Deputy Commissioner was raising, one-on-one interaction, the power relationship of a bully to a victim is one issue. But once you blast out on the internet, and within 5 minutes, 5,000,
Right.
and then that geometrically expands, you have the potential of having that many more bullies interacting with the individual.
Right.
You've now amplified a situation that is, the law is catching up to the consequences. On the higher ed side, the only thing that we can do is to let people know what the computer use policy is,
Right.
and what their responsibilities are.
So-
But once the send key is pressed,
Right.
the damage is done.
So let's talk about that. From a law enforcement standpoint, we were privy to the judgment and sentencing against Clemente's bully. To be exact, it was 30 days in jail, 3 years probation, 300 hours of community service, a $10,000 fine, and counseling on cyberbullying and alternative lifestyles. Was this a fair sentencing, in your opinion, Commissioner DeRienzo?
It's a hard call. The judge had all of the facts in front of him when he made that determination. I don't know. I don't know what the background of the perpetrators are. It seems kind of lenient. The thing you're trying to do is save an individual now. You've lost one, you're trying to save another, to change their attitudes. The ideal situation would have been to grab them before and let them know the consequences of what their actions were before they pushed that button, how serious it could be, the things that could happen to them. But again, on the surface, it doesn't look very hard. And I'm sure the family would feel that it wasn't enough. On the other hand, why did the person do this, and what is their background as far as never having committed a crime before, and that doesn't satisfy the family of the victim. But
it feels wrong.
Right.
It feels wrong, even though
Yes.
you're absolutely right in your
Yeah.
answer of we don't know all the facts. The judge had all the facts. We don't know.
It
but from a observer point of view, it feels wrong.
Yeah.
Although I think that the perpetrator didn't recognize what he was doing. I mean, he thought he was making a joke,
Right.
And however warped that thinking was and how misguided that was, I don't know.
Right.
I wasn't there, but I don't know that what his intent was to do that level of harm. But it spiraled because he hit that send button
Right.
and didn't understand the far-reaching effects, or didn't think. He might have understood, but didn't think about the far-reaching effects that the technology could have, and how that's so overwhelmingly outed.
Absolutely.
And that's why the law raises that issue when you're dealing with someone's sexual orientation or their religion or their backgrounds. It becomes much more serious a case.
VP Anderson, your thoughts on this?
No, you're hearing two experts, and it's a frustrating situation. I think that from a campus perspective, it can only be an educational exercise, both for new faculty coming in and as I said before, students in terms of the orientation process. I think people need to know what is acceptable and what is not acceptable behavior. Unfortunately, social media and technology has changed the playing field and amplified the dangers so rapidly that I'm not sure that we have all in our, with our different trades and skill sets on the medical side, on the law enforcement side, I'm not sure that we're really there to make sure we have the protections that the average person needs.
We barely understand all the far-reaching consequences, and so the laws, the rules, the guidelines, the policies are catching up with that as technology
And
advances.
just getting that information out to a school, a university with 23, 25, 30,000 students, you know.
On that note, you know, it's definitely not a topic we're going to be able to solve today, but it's very much appreciated. Dr. Walsh, VP Anderson, Commissioner DeRienzo, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to thank our guests for joining us and providing their unique perspectives. If you like what you saw on the show today, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any comments for myself, you can reach out to me via email or Twitter. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And remember, every life is a book. Make yours a bestseller. Have a good night.